Hey, Algebra 1 peeps, Mr. Hayward, this is your 4.3 practice. I know it's practice, so it's homework, but I want to help you out. So I am going to do the odds. Plus, this is a little different than the Khan Academy practice that you just did. Okay? But before we do this practice, I just want to recap a couple of super important things about parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines, the big thing that we learned about them, besides the fact that it's just two lines that never touch, is the fact that they have the same slope. That's it. That's the big thing. Now, perpendicular lines, it was slightly different. Perpendicular lines, that was two lines that touch exactly once, but they touch at a very specific angle of 90 degrees. And in fact, every single one of these angles would also be 90 degrees, whatever. But perpendicular lines, their slopes were opposite reciprocals. If I can spell that right. Opposite reciprocals. So opposite, just meaning you change the sign. So if it's positive, change it to negative. If it's negative, change it to positive. And reciprocal means you flip it. Quick example, if I give you something like 3/4, and then I say, tell me a perpendicular slope, you would say, well, this is positive, so my perpendicular slope is negative. And this is a 3 on top and 4 on the bottom, so I'm going to flip that. 4 on top, 3 on bottom. These two things are perpendicular slopes. If I were to graph two lines that had slopes like this, they would cross at 90 degrees guaranteed. All right, now let's take that information and let's use it to do this nonsense. All right, like I said, I'm doing all the odds. There's 16 on here. Some of these will take almost no time at all. Some of them will take a little bit more time. All right, write the point-slope form of the equation of the line described. All right, point-slope form. So before I do anything else, I'm going to remind myself what point-slope form is. And it is this. Y opposite y1 equals slope times x opposite x1. All right, so I need a point and a slope. So let's see what I was given. Hey, I was given a point right here. So here's my x1 and my y1. So before I do anything else, I want to remind you in point-slope form, you're always going to have these things. The y, the x, the parentheses, the equal sign. So you're really just filling in three things. The slope and the two parts of your point. I can actually fill in the two parts of my point right now. So if x is 5, the opposite would be -5. And then if y is 2, the opposite is -2 or -2. Now the only thing I need to fill in is my slope. Now it says parallel to this thing. Now don't forget, parallel means same slope. So if I can figure out the slope of this line, then I should be able to know what to put in here. Quick and easy. This is slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b, meaning the slope is literally right there just waiting for you. So if this line has a slope of 2/5, a parallel line will also have a slope of 2/5, and I'm done. That's my answer. All right, number 3, same thing. So still point-slope form, so we are still looking at y opposite y1 equals slope times x opposite x1. You don't have to write this out every single time, but I find it helpful when explaining. All right, so I still have a point. I still have my x1 and my y1, and I can plug those in right now. x1 is 4, so the opposite of x1 would be a -4. Now y1 is a -2. The opposite of a -2 is a +2. So put those in pretty quick, pretty simple. Now my slope, not sure yet, but I do know it's parallel to this. Y equals a -x minus 1. Don't forget that there is an invisible 1 here, and that is actually where my slope is, -1. And I'm done. Boom. Look at that. Some people might even point out that you could write this without the 1, and you could write it just like that. That is true. So if you want to write it like this, that's fine, because again, those ones you don't actually need. I'm guessing most of you are probably going to write it with the 1, so it's -1 because it puts a number there, makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Cool with it. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at number 5. Write the slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form of the equation of the line described. So now I need to write this in y equals mx plus b. Well, I've got, let's see, a point and then a line that's parallel. So I can find the slope pretty quickly because, again, line that's parallel, so y equals mx plus b. My slope, I know, is 5. But I have no idea what b is. I can guarantee you b is not 2. Okay? And it's probably not one of these numbers. So here's what you should do instead. You can do what we did up here. You could write it in point slope form first and then solve for y. Let me show you. I have a slope and I have a point. So what if I did what I did before in 1 and 3 and I said x1, y1, let's write this in point slope form. So y opposite of y1, so y1 is a -2, opposite would be a +2, times my slope, which we know is 5 based on this equation, and then x opposite of x1. x1 is a -1, so I'm going to put a +1. Now I'm not done. This is point slope form, but it is super helpful because now all I have to do is solve for y. And then in the end, it's going to say y equals 5x plus something, and that will be our b. All right, so 5, I'm going to distribute that, and I get 5x plus 5 on the left-hand side. I haven't done anything, so it still says y plus 2, plus, almost wrote a minus there. And then lastly, if I subtract 2 from both sides, well, this goes away, and I'm left with, oh, I crossed off the wrong thing, sorry. This goes away, I have a y, 5x, and then 5 minus 2 is 3. Sorry, again, crossed off the wrong thing there. But so, in this case, b was 3, which I figured out by solving for it. And I can do the exact same thing in number 7. So number 7, I've got a point, and I've got a parallel line. Again, there is a 1 right here. So I know slope is 1, but I have no idea what b is. So I'm going to do what I did in number 5. First, I'm going to write it in point slope form, and then I'll solve for y. So this is my x1 and my y1, my point, right? So y opposite y1. y1 is +1, so I put a -1, equals slope, which is a 1, parentheses x opposite x1. So that's +4, so I put a -4, and now I solve. So I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to distribute it, which you might laugh at that because multiplying by 1 does nothing. 1 times x is x. 1 times the -4 is -4. And then lastly, I am going to add 1. And I get y equals x. -4 plus 1 is -3. Some of you might look at that and say, wait, where's my slope? We said we have a slope of 1, and we do. Don't forget, if there's not a coefficient, you have an invisible 1 there. If you want to write it in, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is correct. But no, if this is a multiple choice question, that 1 will not be there. The answer will be y equals x minus 3. I guarantee it. All right, now let's get into some more fun. All right, write the point slope form of the equation of the line described. All right, so we are back to point slope form. So we're back to y opposite y1 equals slope times x opposite x1. Our final answer will be in this form. But if you look at number 9, it gives you a point, so you have an x1, y1, but it gives you a perpendicular line. Perpendicular. Okay, so a little trickier. So I should look at this and say, well, my slope is still right here. Now I'm going to do something little strange. You can see here, put a weird oval. That's because I'm going to make this into a fraction. That is a slope of 4 over 1. Now, let's go back to our perpendicular notes here. Opposite, reciprocal. So, if we say 4 over 1, if I want the opposite reciprocal, well, this is positive, therefore my other slope is going to be negative. Then instead of 4 over 1, I'm going to put 1 over 4. This would be a perpendicular slope. So I'm going to write that down off to the side. The slope of my new line is going to be a negative 1 over 4. Lights just turned off in my classroom. There we go. Okay. All right, now I have a point and I have a slope, and I can write this in point-slope form. Y opposite y1, y1 is a positive 1, so the opposite would be a negative 1, equals the slope that we just discovered, because negative 1/4 is perpendicular to positive 4 over 1, times x opposite of x1. Negative 4, opposite becomes positive 4. There it is, I'm done. That's point slope form. It's goes through this point and it's perpendicular to this slope. All right, let's do that again. So I still have a point, something's perpendicular. X1, Y1. Now this example is kind of weird because look at the slope here. If I were to make this into a fraction and put my invisible ones, it just had a negative. It is now negative 1 over 1. Okay, I'm going to come back here. Negative 1 over 1. If I want a perpendicular slope, well, instead of negative, it's positive, right? And 1 over 1 turns into 1 over 1, which is just 1. So it's actually kind of strange here because if I have a slope of negative 1, the perpendicular slope is positive 1. And really quick, I can prove that to you on a graph pretty easily. I'm going to write a line at any starting point will do. Let's say I pick this starting point right here. And I'm going to do a slope of positive 1. So positive 1 over 1. If I go up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, I would have a line that looks something like this, right? Now I'm going to pick any starting point again. Let's pick this one right here, and I'm going to draw a line that has a slope of negative 1. That goes down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, and I have a line that looks something like this. And I know it's not going to be perfect, but these actually cross at a 90-degree angle. Yeah, kind of weird, right? Now coming back to this, though, that means that my slope here of my new line that's perpendicular to this is positive 1. Or you could write 1 over 1 if you want. And now I can just write it into my formula. Y opposite y1. y1 is a negative 3, so I put a positive 3. Equals slope times x opposite x1. x1's a negative 2, so I put a positive 2, and I'm done. The only tricky part there is figuring out your perpendicular slope. 2 more. 13. All right, now we are looking at slope-intercept form. So we are going back to y equals mx plus b. And I'm given a point and a perpendicular line. So this is going to be similar to 5 and 7, where you're going to want to put it in point-slope form first, and then you're going to want to solve. Okay? So, but first let me figure out my perpendicular slope. So perpendicular to this, I know the slope of this line is negative 1/3, so let's take a hot second to figure out something that's perpendicular. Well, this is negative, so my new slope is going to be positive. This has a 1 over 3, so the reciprocal would be 3 over 1, or you could even just call that 3. Either one will work. So now I've got my x1, y1. So I'm going to say y opposite y1 equals that new slope I just found out, x opposite x1. Now that's what it looks like in point slope form, but we don't want point slope form. We want slope-intercept form. So I'm going to solve for y. I'm going to distribute this 3. Keep my colors consistent. 3x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times a negative 2 is a negative 6. And then I'm going to add this 1. This goes away, and I get 3x. Let's see, negative 6 plus 1 is a negative 5. There it is. So 13 final answer is y equals 3x minus 5. All right, last one. This is number 15. Same stuff. So we've got a point in x1, y1. And then let's figure out my new slope. Now the slope here is a negative 1 over 1. Now we actually already did a slope exactly like that in number 11. We found out that my new slope is positive 1. You can go through the whole process again. That's negative, becomes positive, and then 1 over 1 flips to still be 1 over 1, which is just 1. Now I'm going to write this in point slope form. So y opposite y1. y1 is positive 1, opposite is negative 1, equals my slope, which we just found out here, times x opposite x1. x1 is 3, so my slope, or excuse me, x1 is 3, so the opposite would be negative 3. Has nothing to do with slope there. All right, we're going to distribute this 1 again, just like last time. I said that's kind of silly. If you want to write 1 times x is 1x, that's fine. 1 times a negative 3 is a negative 3. And then my last step here would be to add 1. And I get y equals x minus 2, because negative 3 plus 1 is a negative 2. Notice I didn't write this 1. Again, if this is a multiple choice question, I guarantee you that 1 is not going to be there. If you want to write it right now, I'm fine with that. If I were grading these by hand, I would mark it correct. But you're going to be taking a multiple choice test, so that 1 will not be there. All right, so that is numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. When you turn in your homework, make sure that those are copied down as well. You do the evens, turn these into Google Classroom. Thank you.